Hey, good morning. Well, as you can see on the sign here, we're going to go see somebody from Google today. So the presentation is called A Day in the Life of Google. That's one of the cool things about working on a campus like this at Grand Canyon is that there's always interesting people that come to see us. And so let's go over to the theology building where they're going to meet, and we're going to find out what kind of planet these people live on and what kind of air they breathe at this exotic place called the Googleplex. So let's go check it out. There's going to be 4 people that will tell us about their life, probably about their interview process, and about their job. So at the end of the video, I'm going to give you some of my own observations and see what I think. And perhaps you could leave some comments as well to figure out what kind of company that Google would be if you got a job there, like some of the lucky few.
Awesome. Thanks, Chad and Shauna. So super awesome to be here. My name is John. I am one of the Googlers here today, and I will also be moderating our panel. So we're super excited to be on campus and talk a little bit about what some of our experiences have been at Google over the past anywhere from 1 to almost 7 years. And maybe we can start with Alexis, but I would love to hear, a little bit more about each of your kind of paths to Google, maybe your background, what that was like, and how you were able to get a job at Google.
Yeah, so as I shared prior, the majority of my career has been focused within media, specifically digital media. Oddly enough, how I came to Google is I blindly applied on the website. I didn't know anybody. Wasn't referred by anybody. So not sure what was happening on that day, but for whatever reason, my resume got read, and then I got to do lots of rounds of interviews, and here I am today. I think what's most unique potentially about my path at Google is, and something that I think Google really admires, is that outside perspective. So bringing things that I've learned potentially from other companies, other managers, mentors, and kind of just bringing those insights to round out the team better. So yeah, that's a little bit about my journey at Google.
Yeah, I'm a software developer. It was not a straight path to get there at all. I love to tell this story, but I failed my first computer science exam in college, believe it or not, and just stuck with it because I enjoyed it so much. You learn more from failure than you do from successes, right? So stick with it if it's something that you're really passionate about, right? I did not get a bachelor's of science. I got a bachelor of arts because I went to liberal arts college, and I also did a minor in psychology, so bit of a weirdo, to be honest, but that's okay. So I graduated. Actually, the first thing I did at Google, I did a summer program, so y'all should look at the summer programs. They're really good. I did a 1-week summer program. It was really short for freshmen, and that was kind of my first exposure, and I was like, oh my God, this place is so amazing. I want to go here. So when I was graduating, I applied, got rejected. But I ended up going to Microsoft, which is really cool, which is even a funny story as well, because I show up to the interview and they're like, all right, everyone here is applying for Azure. And I'm like, what's Azure? And they're like, it's the cloud. And I was like, what's the cloud? So I didn't know anything, but managed to get the job and learn about the cloud, and I'm still doing that now. But then, yeah, after a year and a half at Microsoft, I applied to Google, got rejected again. And then I learned a lot from those 2 rejections and came in the 3rd time and finally was able to get it. So anyways, you just kind of have to keep going. Don't expect it to be easy. If you're not failing, you're probably not learning or pushing yourself as you should be, right? So I love the saying of, like, if you're afraid of failure, you're afraid of success, right? So anyways.
Good line. I probably took a long and winding road to get to Google. So I'm Irish. I studied business in Dublin in Ireland. I didn't really know what I was going to do. I ended up going into finance and actually trained with Deloitte as a CPA, which I was always pretty bad at. Then I joined a big consumer goods company, Diageo, and I kind of moved into kind of strategy and sales and marketing. Moved to Australia, moved to New York, moved back to Australia. That was many years. And then I think at the time I was just like super passionate about technology, and I was like, I think I want to change it up. And so I think, when you think technology, I was like, well, I'd love to work for Google. I was probably different to Alexis. I was like, I want to work for Google. So I did actually start reaching out and networking and see who I knew in there, because their interviews are brutal. And that really helped. I think that networking part to just get the inside line on what do they care about, trying to get your name in there was a massive help. So eventually I got into Google Australia, and then 2 years ago I moved to Google San Francisco, which is where I am now. That's been my journey.
Awesome, great. So we heard a little bit about your journeys and kind of what got you to where you are today. Would love to hear, maybe we'll start with David this time and kind of go reverse order, but love to hear from each of you a little bit more kind of about your current role, kind of maybe what you're doing in it, and what you kind of maybe enjoy the most or maybe don't enjoy the most, and maybe how your current role has kind of helped shape you as a person.
Yeah, good question. I think me and Alexis are going to be quite similar here. So my current role, I'm an account executive, so it's kind of managing them, mainly working on the marketing side. So it's how do companies like Grand Canyon use Google platforms like search or YouTube or whatever it is to grow their business. And so I love the role because you're kind of at this mix of marketing and all the things that are going on there. And also how it intersects with technology and digital. And that's just a really interesting, and it's changing all the time. I think the other part is that Google just keeps getting involved in more and more things. So, we started, you just talk about search, but now you're talking about YouTube, you're talking about the cloud, you're talking about all these different new products and things that we're doing, and so you have to kind of stay up to speed with all this stuff all the time. So it's very fast paced, which is awesome. You get to work with a lot of interesting people across the wider Google, which is really cool. You get to work with amazing partners like Grand Canyon. So that's probably the good parts of the role. I think the challenges to the role are it's intense. It is very fast paced. So you're never off. But you just try and kind of balance that as best you can.
It was about current role, right, and what I do? Okay, so I'm a software developer. So I sit in a dark room and I stare at... No, I'm just kidding. So being a software engineer is a lot of stuff. I mean, writing code is kind of the thing that I'm meant to be doing, but that also entails a lot of other things. So I write a lot of design documents, so I design systems. Specifically, I work on really, really fast memory. So customers, like big customers, will use Google Cloud to build their websites, their apps, things like that. And they need things to be really fast. But they also need things not to go down, right? Outages suck, and you can imagine Google search going down, that'd be like, whoa, So on any given day, it's a lot of meetings, a lot of discussions, a lot of writing documents. I get to work with people all over the world as well. So we have site reliability to maintain our services up and running. So we coordinate with them. And then, of course, when I have time in my day, I'll try and write some code too. But yeah, that's most of what I do.
I have one follow-up question for you. So working with people different parts of the world, is there any particular parts of the world you've had particularly amazing experience working with, or maybe a particular area you've had maybe a challenging experience working with?
Yeah, so I work primarily with people based out of, actually, funnily, Dublin and also Sydney. And also Warsaw, Poland. So I know, right? Yeah, you probably know people. No, they've been fantastic. They've been so amazing, and they're, honestly, they're very accommodating. I think the toughest thing is just time, and I think this is true just generally, right, for us. So we have TGIF, is the big old company meeting. Thank God it's Friday, and we celebrate it on Thursday. And the reason is that our Thursdays in San Francisco is Friday morning elsewhere, right? If we were to do it Friday, that would be their Saturday. It's not fair. But no, I've had really good experiences. No real challenges other than time. Oh, I had a mentee in Israel. And I had to get up at 6 in the morning because I was there's 6 p.m. or something. So that was to meet because that's the only time that works. But yeah, overall, really cool experience.
And I guess just to echo what David said, I think as an account executive, it's really our job to bring the best of Google to our clients. So whether that's just new consumption habits, research, deep insights, to new technology platforms to make sure that they're attributing their marketing dollars appropriately. I think that's what really our job is to do, since Google is massive and it's changing constantly. So how can we continue to push our clients to be on the forefront of marketing technology to help them achieve their business goals?
Awesome. So as you also think about your current role, or it could possibly be unrelated, when you think about maybe your favorite thing or maybe your proudest thing about working at Google, what is that thing that maybe really gets you up in the morning? Maybe we can start with Alexis.
Besides the free food?
Besides the free food.
Yeah, I think the coolest thing about Google is, I would say the inclusive culture is, I haven't experienced this at any other company before, but it's highly encouraged for you to network within Google, meet new people, find out what different roles are. There's so many different opportunities, and it's really, really encouraged for you to learn more, challenge yourself, find out what you're passionate about. I think that is the coolest thing about Google, and that's kind of why I really wanted to work there to begin with, is just the longevity for like a career. So yeah.
So for me, I think the coolest thing that I like a lot about Google is one that like it's like a fantastic place to learn and grow. Like it's just insane the number of resources we have to like develop ourselves professionally. But in addition to that, like as you're developing what I like to call like these superpowers, right? Like as you grow the skill sets you want, they've really pushed me and other people to branch out and try to see where else you can apply these things, right? So for me, that's been a lot of outreach and trying to like help other people like be software engineers and things like that. That's something that I'm passionate about and excited about. And I'm here, right? Like my manager's like, go, like please do, like have fun, you know, like it'll be great. So that's really cool.
Yeah, I think I would definitely echo that. But I think my favorite thing about Google is because things move so fast, they're just always willing to try new things. Like if you have an idea, they'll be like, yeah, let's try it and see what happens. So you kind of have this real sense of freedom where, you know, if you've got something, you can just go and do it. And if it works, they'll scale it out really fast, which is pretty amazing. I've certainly been in, you know, had the chance to work in different companies where it was kind of like, this is our way of doing things. And if you ever wanted to change that, like good luck, it would take years. No one was interested. They were like, this works. We're just going to keep the way it is. And so it could get really frustrating if you're like, well, I think there's a better way of doing it, or we should try something different. It was like really hard to actually make any of that happen. Whereas, and Google, even though it's big now, there's like a lot of employees, they kind of try and push down a ton of autonomy to be like, hey, if you guys want to just do it, just go do it. You don't need approval from a million people. It's just like try it, and if it doesn't work, whatever, let's try something new. So that's really cool. I think it's kind of keeps it pretty exciting and fresh all the time.
Yeah, that's great. Then definitely echo some of those thoughts about it. Like the autonomy is definitely a big one. So shifting also to perks. So we've all probably heard there's a lot of cool perks at Google. Would love to hear from each of you about maybe your favorite, or maybe your two favorite perks that you enjoy that is really important to your well-being at Google. Maybe we can start with David.
The perks are insane. They're so good. I mean, the food, the coffee, you got gyms on site, all this kind of stuff. I think it's funny about the perks, because they're amazing, and it's so nice to have that. And I still remember a world where I didn't have any of that stuff, so I can kind of half appreciate it. But it's so funny that you just get used to what you have. That in our office in San Francisco, even though we have this free cafe and it does like all this food every day, people have started moaning that they don't like that particular thing on the menu. And it's funny that you just still get that, even though they're providing free food for everyone, people still start get used to it and just start moaning about it. So I think for me, those perks are incredible. And I try and remember, like, this is lucky to have this stuff, and that's not just take it for granted.
Yeah, I think for me, absolutely agree with that. You get kind of used to having these things, but I really appreciate how they cater to health for me personally. So like, having like mental health wellness centers like right on campus, or having doctors. Like I went upstairs, got my flu shot, came back downstairs. That was really cool. Having the gym on site, being able to shower in the mornings, all these things are really great, and I think have really helped keep me healthy. And the food's healthy. The food's actually really healthy and really delicious. So, like no complaints on my end. Yeah.
Yeah, all of that is great. Not to sound too pretentious or anything, but we do provide massages on campus also, which is kind of wild. I haven't gotten it yet. I kind of still grappling with the fact I feel like it's kind of weird to get a massage at work. But I mean, that is a pretty awesome perk to have. But yeah, food, you can't beat the food.
Yeah, you get, I think, is it like 60 minutes like every year on your Google anniversary, your Googleversary. So last question before we move into Q&A from you all is, I think, taking a step back and reflecting to when the three of you were maybe in the shoes of the room that we're seeing right now in your sophomore, junior, senior, or freshman even in college. I'm thinking about kind of like what's the next step in your life, post-college. So kind of thinking back and putting yourself in the shoes of when you were in college, what's one key piece of advice that you might give to your college self now, looking back?
Yeah, I think what's been most surprising over my career is how willing people are to help. I've sent messages through LinkedIn asking for informational interviews. Yeah, like David was saying earlier, the more you try to network, I think you'd just be really surprised on how many people have been in your shoes before and are more than happy to help, answer any questions, refer you to a job, give you a little more insight in terms of how they got there, suggestions on interview tips, resume tips. I think that is like the most important thing. If I can give my college self some advice is, don't be afraid just to ask. And I think you'd be surprised by how willing people are to help you out.
Cool. Yeah, 100% agree. Networking and all that, super, super, super important. I guess I have like two small things. Like the first one is just always take care of yourself no matter what, right? You ought to be your number one. You might care about a lot of things, but if you fall apart, they all fall apart. So, mental health, physical health, take care of it. But the second thing too is just that your path to wherever it is that you might end up, it could be Google, it could be, anywhere else, or you might start your own thing. It doesn't have to look like anybody else's, right? I think I mentioned early on that I was a software developer at a liberal arts college who liked psychology, and for a while I was like embarrassed. I was like, that's not what I should be doing. I should be reading about compilers or something, that's what all my friends are doing. And it doesn't have to be that way. You can learn from them, right? But really try to appreciate your strengths and your individuality, right? I think you were saying earlier that something that stuck out for you was just the breadth of experiences that you've had and how they're so unique. Those things are all super valuable, right? So value yourself, value your individuality, grow your strengths, learn from others, but it doesn't have to follow any preset path.
Yeah, I love that, and I would echo that point that I think one of the things I've probably learned and experienced is, you kind of think, well, I certainly did when I was back in college, like this is going to be my career, and then it's like, well, how do I just keep going down this road? I think now you can, I think it's getting easier and easier where you can jump careers at any point, and you can do huge jumps to just change completely because it's so easy to learn new skills, whether it's online or whatever it is, that like, those career paths are getting much more interesting. You'd be like, I might try this, but hey, after 3 or 4 years done, this is not for me, because how do you know? It is getting easier to kind of change, which I think is really cool. And so certainly when I think about my career, I don't really think like 10 years down the track, like where do I want to be? And that was certainly when I was in college. Everyone was like, you have to have your long-term vision. What do you want to do? And you work towards that. I find it so hard to think like 10 years down the track that I'm more like, I just want to think 1 year down the track, like what's next, and then keep just kind of making my way through my career. I would say the other piece though is, like once you decide what you want to do, I think it's really like, I don't know if hustle's the right word, but you really got to go after it because it is super competitive in some of these places. And I think, if you're like trying to get into Google or trying to get into any company, you got to start thinking, like, what is everything I can do to put myself in the best position to get in there? And being smart to like try and find people in that company or that industry, because like insider knowledge is huge. I remember when I was trying to change into technology, and I met a guy in Ireland that I knew, and he worked in Google for a lot of years, and then he was working in Facebook. And I was like, look, it's cool. I'm going to build a website. I think I was trying to build my resume in a website because I thought that would demonstrate that I'm digitally savvy. And he just looked at me and was like, please don't build a website. Everyone does that. And he kind of gave me much better advice. Hey, if you want to show this is a better way to do it. And that kind of insider knowledge is just critical. And I think when we see this, like, the interview stage, you see people who have just practiced interviews, and you can just see it where they're so slick. Like they can come in and just tell a story about who they are, what they're about, what they can bring. Versus you see other people who come in and they're just kind of like, here's my resume, I can just walk you through what I've done. And you can just see one person's really practiced that, and one hasn't really thought about the interview itself that much. And so thinking about like the steps you're gonna have to go through to get the job you want, and then how do you just practice that and get better and do everything you can, I think is something I've learned. You really have to do that because that's what other people are doing, and it's like, I think that's how you're gonna stand out.
We had like an interesting motto at Under Armour that was always stay humble and hungry. So always respect the opportunity, never walk into a room necessarily knowing or feeling that you know more than anybody else. So stay humble, but also stay hungry. So to David's point, you gotta hustle. And when you are in an interview position, know that there are, dozens of other people answering the same questions you are. So constantly just think about how you can put yourself in the best light, know your brand, know your story, and think creatively of how you can stand apart from the crowd.
Yeah, all great. I think I definitely echo a lot of those. And the other thing I would also add, talking back to myself, would be really find something you're passionate about. As you think about graduating, there's can be a lot of pressure to find a job or whatever that next step might be. And looking back on it, it's really more important to kind of be restless and keep looking for something you're really passionate about, and not maybe just taking like the first opportunity, and whether it's a job or grad school or whatever that kind of future path for you is, and being restless and really finding something that you're gonna enjoy and gonna kind of enjoy on a day to day, since it is gonna take up such a good chunk of your time. So. Well, great. So, like I said, we wanted to save a lot of time here. We got about a little over 20 minutes left, but really wanted to hear what was top of mind for you all, and kind of what questions that you have for the panelists about Google, about their experiences at Google. Still got some time. This is your chance. But yes, would love to take questions that you all have. Start in the back, white shirt.
Well, I made the brutal comment, so I'll give a take on. I think I had to go through like 8 rounds to get in, and so it's very long to start with. But also, I think they certainly what I saw before, like the people interviewing was probably your team, like your manager and maybe some of your team would interview. At Google, they try and make it a bit less biased, so you have to talk to somebody who's totally different teams. You have to talk to maybe people in different countries. And they're all trying to ask quite different questions. So some of them might be like, demonstrate your leadership abilities, or some of them might be like, can you just work through problems? They'd still do some of those weird Google questions. Like, I think somebody was like, how many golf balls could fit in a school bus? Or I got asked, I think, how much would you charge me to paint this room? And you have to kind of build out why you get to that number. And they do a lot of behavioral questions like, what would you do in this situation? What would you do in that situation? And so I certainly find they do a lot of those. If you haven't prepped those pretty well, you can get just caught out in the spot pretty easily. So it was just, it's very long, very thorough. Lots of different people would come in at different angles. And so you just really had to prep for that a lot. I don't know if anyone else had
Yeah, and I feel like the interview process, I think, has changed. I think we try to be a lot more transparent in terms of the types of questions we'll be asking. It's still difficult to prepare for those, random questions. But ultimately, as you can deduce, like they're trying just to understand how you think through problems, not necessarily like the answer that you arrive at. So I think there's a little comfort in knowing that that's what they're looking for. But yeah, I remember I had to do a mock presentation in front of a room of 12 Googlers. David was in the room staring me down, and it's intimidating. Like, you're supposed to like pitch Google to Google, and I'm like, it's intimidating. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, as long as this might sound corny, but true to yourself and honest, I think that authenticity kind of shines often, rather than if you're just being slick and salesy. So.
Yeah, I wanted to highlight one point as well that David made earlier, which is just that interviewing itself is a skill. You might have all the skills that you need to do the job. You might be the best at it, right? But if you can't demonstrate it, right, that's the hard part. So I mentioned earlier, like I was rejected a few times at Google, right? Not because I didn't have what it took. Like I worked at another big company, but I just didn't know how to demonstrate that to them, right? And I took the feedback, and all the feedback was not around my problem solving or engineering. It's just like, hey, you're too slow, or like, hey, you were confusing, or your, handwriting was sloppy. Yeah, that's really, you got to practice it, basically. And one of the best ways is just to go at it, right? I learned how to do Google interviews by interviewing at Google, like I had to fail a few times. Yeah.
Immersive experience. Great. Yes, in the front.
When you're being interviewed, what do you think Google wants most in a person in terms of skill? Like, everybody has their individual skills that they're going to use for their job, but what's the most overarching skill that they want with each person?
I can speak to that a bit, and this is just from kind of my personal experience, obviously. But I think a lot, and actually, I think Alexis made the point in one of the last questions. But I think it's really like how you're thinking through a problem, and it's not arriving at the right answer. To David's point about how much does it cost to paint a room, right? Well, if I just asked anybody that question, there's no right answer to that because there's so many follow-ups, like how big is the room, what color, how many corners are there, etc. So it really is a lot of it's like what kind of questions are you asking, how you're thinking it through, what's the thought process like. Google's very, and the reason being because Google's very ambiguous a lot of times. A lot of things are changing, it's very, very fast paced, and sometimes there's not always like a clear direction as to maybe where you're supposed to go. So that's why that thought process is so important, because it's like what kind of questions are you asking, and how are you really approaching that situation?
What are some challenges you're facing right now in the marketing side of Google? What are like pain points from your customers that you're struggling right now that are tough for you, like on a day-to-day basis?
That's a good question. I would say one that probably jumps out is maybe measurement around, when you think about digital marketing and where, you all can spend your time across so many different areas, whether it's social media or email or website, all these different things, that trying to, as a brand, know where do I try and show up and talk to these people that it has the most impact is really hard. And then how do I prove that's actually help my business grow? That's been really interesting, and there's a big, not want to go too much into it, but like the privacy thing as well around. I think there's some really good debates now around people and their data and what that means going forward. That's probably it's a good time to have that then impacts the digital marketing side and how we do that. But I think that, and then just I think people are changing so fast. Like things are, you probably all saw TikTok coming up. It was just huge now. It's the next social media platform, and it's gotten so big so fast that like it just keeps where people are spending their time and just changes so fast that I think we're always trying to just keep up with that and keep pace with that.
Yes, right in the back on the blue shirt.
With the rise of hardware that Google has made, like the Pixel phones and stuff, has that led to a change in like group structures? Like now there's like a specialized like hardware unit, or are you guys still pretty much one larger group?
Yeah, I think hardware is definitely a huge bet for Google as a company. We've really centralized a lot of our hardware divisions recently. Like I think Nest used to be its own kind of standalone area of Google, and now that's like really integrated into Google hardware. So when you think like you may be familiar with the Google Home Hub, but now it's called the Google Nest Hub. So a lot of them have that Nest name. So there has been a lot of integration with Nest and the other ones. But as you've seen, our first hardware line was maybe 2015 or 2016, so not that long ago. And yeah, you're seeing a few generations of Pixels now, and the hub has come up. You have like the Nest doorbell, so there's been quite a bit to keep up with in the last 4 years, and I think it is a big focus area for Google as a company. It's a great question.
My question is, in Google, is there a work-life balance? Because I know everything is changing, and I'm asking that concerning the nature of the work in Google, and I just want to know if for the employees they have time, because if you don't have time to take off, like vacation time to refuel and then refresh, sometimes you can crash. That's one of the panel member was saying. Yeah. So do you have like work-life balance that can help the employee to get that spiritually, physically, emotionally healthy so that they can do their work better?
Have you been secretly sitting in on our meetings recently? No, I'm kidding. I think managing work-life balance is difficult no matter where you're at, but especially at Google. But we kind of talked about this earlier too. The amount of resources that we have, whether it's talking to a counselor, whether it's going to the gym, whether it's getting a massage, there are plenty of resources that we have to really help manage our well-being in general. I will say it's a pretty constant conversation and challenge that we have, because I think David alluded to it earlier. It's difficult for us to turn off sometimes and disconnect for work. So I would say it's a work in process, but we haven't perfected it. I haven't perfected it. But I do appreciate how much we talk about it and how much awareness there is about it. I think the next step is just holding ourselves accountable to make sure that we are spending enough time at home, or we are, mentally disconnecting and taking care of ourselves at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I think to that point on resources, like they keep doing more. They did a study on Googlers to be like, why are some people don't feel like they have work-life balance? And they did over 1,000 employees over, I don't know, was it a 3-month period? And they were shared that to try and say, here's some tips. And it was just lots of little interesting things. But one of the examples was, you're at home maybe at 7 p.m. and you just take out your phone to have a quick look to see is there any new emails. And they found most times when you do that, it doesn't turn into a quick look. It turns into like 2 hours later, you're still going through emails. And they just said those little habits that you just so many people go down this rabbit hole of, I just have a quick look, and then it turns into you're actually working at night. And so they're constantly just little things like that could actually make a difference to your work-life balance. I thought was really interesting. So they keep trying to do more to help in that place. The one thing I'd say is it is intense. It is a lot of work, but they are quite flexible. So I've got a 2-year-old son at home, and I try and do pickups. So I'm trying to out the door at 5 every day, and so they're like, well, whatever. If you need to go, that's fine. Just manage your work whenever you can. So I think the one good thing is it's very flexible.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely about taking advantage of the resources, but it's going to be true just throughout your life, whether it be here or at work. Like, you have to make it a priority yourself, right? Like, at Google, like, no one's going to stop you from overworking necessarily until it becomes an issue, right? Until it's very obviously deteriorating your work. So you got to make it a priority yourself.
Yes, sir.
2 questions. One, is it ever concerning to you how much data there is on consumers? And 2, what's the next big shift you see in digital marketing?
Good question. I think time's up. No, I think the data one, Google and from the beginning has been, when we talk about personal information, they're like, that is the most important thing. And so even in our jobs, we would never get anywhere near anyone's personal information. Like, it's locked away. So they've always been tried to be very careful and respect that. I think, though, there has been, when the internet came and nobody even thought about data as a thing, like my data. And so I do think now that the debate that's happening is good and probably right, that just as a society you're thinking about, well, it's my data. What does that mean? What does that mean going forward? I don't know where that's going to shake out, but I think it is the right time to start talking about that and see where it goes forward, because there's been so many headlines around that. I think Google is trying to lean towards more respect that don't work, then that's the right trade-off to have. As much as they can, and if that means some of the things we could do don't work, then that's the right trade-off to have. So yeah, I think personally that's a good thing that we're having this debate now. In terms of the next trend in digital marketing, who knows? From the Google point of view, we're doing a lot of work on voice and home assistants and just assistant in general. And we're putting a ton of effort in there. We're starting to do work on things like augmented reality, and you're seeing that more come up through phones, and there's lots of interesting things that can happen there. But I think no one's got a crystal ball. I remember maybe 4 years ago we were talking about virtual reality was going to be the next big trend. I'm not sure that's quite kicked off the way anyone thought it would. So I think that's the challenge in technology, is everyone's trying to guess where it's going to go and no one knows, and you're just trying to, Google certainly made some bets where we think, but like maybe some company will just come out of nowhere and change it all up. So that keeps us exciting.
Great. Yes.
Dealing with projects, I'm curious to see how maybe you guys approach a project. So when you guys usually approach a project, do you guys normally have a certain framework in place that you guys usually gear towards, like maybe like the Agile framework or the PMP framework? Is that something you guys utilize, or is there something Google tells you that you guys should be using this framework or something like this going through with a project?
On the engineering side, right, I think most teams have started taking on Agile. So we do sprints and planning, and then we do retrospectives, and we do stand-ups. So for people, like, sprints are like 2 week chunks or week-long chunks where you just say, here's what I'm going to try and accomplish, right? And the planning phase is longer, so usually it's like anywhere from 3 to 6 months where you're like, I'm going to try and deliver this thing. And then you break it up into these sprints, and the stand-ups are like very quick, short bursts, like meetups where you're literally standing up, because if it's too long, you're going to get tired, right? Where you say, I'm blocked on this, and here's my status, right? And the whole idea is to unblock you if you are stuck, right? So that's for the team and for organizations, and you have it in larger scopes. In terms of personal planning, that's something that you kind of have to figure out as you go, you know, and that's actually something I'm struggling with myself at the moment, right? Is that the way I approach projects that I can take on by myself is very different from when I have to think about myself and also other teams and also SRE, and also like I have another dev that's working on the project that I designed. So, you know, you kind of have to develop that for yourself. There's no set way, so you kind of just have to, I don't know, read and think and ask. Yeah. How about you guys?
Yeah, as David kind of alluded to this earlier too, it's really on you to kind of, and I think John said this, like thrive in those ambiguous situations and figure out what works best for you. I feel like every time we do team planning, it's never been consistent. We've always have been shaking up what works well, what doesn't work well. Feedback is a big part of our culture at Google, and I think that also applies to kind of our planning process, and constantly kind of like reinventing the wheel, figuring out what works best, what doesn't. So in terms of like sticking to a framework, I wouldn't say that we do that ever.
Mine's kind of a two-parter. In terms of interviews, what would that look like in terms of getting a computer science or engineering related job? And the second part is, what if you want to take that and go into a field in augmented reality development?
Yeah, so there are a ton of resources online, so I'm going to give a very short answer on it. So for me, it was usually 1 or 2 phone screens after you kind of have that initial contact with the recruiter. And then from there, it's an on-site day where you have 5 to 6 interviews. I think it's 5, 4 of them coding, and you work through a problem. We actually try really hard to find questions that you've never heard before, because the whole point is to figure out how you solve problems. And the thing is that really truly measures like what we do every day. Like, there's no book on how to build a cloud, because we're inventing it right now.
What, for each of you, what is the most fulfilling part of your job, like personally?
For me, like what I seek out in a career opportunity is to constantly be challenged and learning and growing. I think every time that I've had the itch to leave a job is when I've felt pretty comfortable. So I think the most fulfilling part of working at Google is like that uncomfortable feeling and being able to, I don't know, really step up to the plate and push myself and just constantly learn.
Fulfilling. I think that's a good question, man. For me, same thing, right? Like, it's about constantly being challenged, but I think going beyond that, as well as also feeling like there's some form of purpose behind it. So, you know, I build infrastructure tooling, really cool, right? But actually that helps people build their businesses, right? And we can work with nonprofits and help them grow and develop as well. And making sure that these things are always available and things like that is really important. And additionally, like, it's kind of helping me kind of broaden what I want to work on going forward as well. So that's also been really fulfilling. It's feeling like I'm growing towards something. I might not know what it is yet, but I know I'm growing.
Yeah, I think for me, I do like the purpose thing is a big one for me, that like what Google's doing, because you know, one, I just think the products are amazing and are actually so helpful. But then some of the other parts of Google, like we have a big health company called Verily that it's doing pretty amazing, like multi-year research that, you know, it'd be very hard for them to get funding from that anywhere else. So it is some cool stuff. I think more day to day. It's just I think seeing some of the impact you can make, because some of these bigger projects, like, they're really hard. You're trying to bring all these people together, but then seeing you can just do stuff and see that impact out there is really cool feeling.
Being a Google such a big company into corporate America, how does having this skill set where we can step into a company like and attending into this, what are the probabilities? Because we will be not having real-time exposure into the product until you are in the product, because that idea may go into different products, different projects altogether itself. What are the probabilities and how Google will encourage people like us?
That's a good question, and it's kind of goes back to something we were talking about a little bit earlier. And actually, my professor, when I was applying to Google the first time for that summer program, sent me an email. I can show you guys the screenshot. But it was, hey, you should apply. The chances are slim, but they're zero if you don't apply. So really, I mean, that's very accurate, right? Like, the chances for anyone really are pretty slim, but they are zero if you don't apply. And it may not be a direct route, right? Like, you might not be able to walk up to Google right now, knock on the door and say, hey, I want a job, and they're going to give it to you. You may need to, get some experience and other things like that, but that doesn't mean you should just, not try, right? So I say go for it, like, definitely apply yourself, go, fail a few times, get experience, build your skill set, and then, like, I make it so that you should be aware that any employer is lucky to have you, right? You're a very hardworking person, right? Build those skills and then demonstrate it, right? And yeah, you can get there.
One more? Yes, in the back.
So based on your personal experience, how does Google award outsider box thinking?
I think they love it. It's something they push so much. We've got this concept of 10x that you might have heard, where it flows through the whole business, that if you're doing something new, like, how can you 10x it or make it 10 times bigger? And I think that's flowing through into all our product side, but even across the whole business is like, hey, we're doing this thing, how can we make it 10x bigger? And which normally means some sort of out-of-the-box thinking, like, it's not just keep doing the same thing we've always done. They have, like, what I love about them, they have that tech culture of, like, if we have an idea, let's just test it quickly and test it small and see if it works. Like, let's not just debate it internally for months and months. Let's just try and what can we build quickly and get it out there. And if it works, and then let's scale it out. But I think they love, I've seen so many examples, they love out-of-the-box thinking. They love people who, and I think to Alexa's point, like, coming in with different perspectives and, like, having a completely different background is amazing, because then if you're coming in there with, like, no one's thought about this before, that's seen as a really, really positive thing.
Well, awesome. I believe we are at time, but thank you all so much for coming. One last quick ask before we all go is we want to get a selfie with all of you. So if you don't mind, give us 1 second. We're going to take that, and you can all put on your best smiles for our official picture.
So, what'd you think? Some of the takeaways that I took were that interviewing is obviously an art, and the grueling interviews at Google seem to be somewhat famous. I was a little disappointed in not seeing exactly the technical work that the students are expected to know when they interview there. It seems to me like if you can solve a few clever problems, you're ready to go at Google. Do they actually look at your resume? Do they value experience? If you own some patents? Did you manage any teams? Or are they just looking for good-looking, smart people, and they'll figure out what to do with you later? So, what's your opinion? So put some comments down below, see what you think. Have you applied for Google? Have you ever worked there? And was this an accurate representation of working at this company?